Why did I nearly crash on this launch? What went so wrong that I almost smashed into the ground, potentially injuring myself and damaging my glider? In order to analyse this near miss, we'll ask the following questions. What happens if the glider hits the ground? What were the factors that led to this incident, and what did I do wrong? What can I do to avoid this dangerous situation in the future? Well, first, let's look at what happens when the base bar of the glider hits the ground. The base bar is the part of the glider that the pilot holds onto and uses it in order to steer the aircraft. If this strikes the ground, then the glider will stop, causing the glider to pivot around it, and the nose of the glider will then hit the ground. If the forward momentum is fast enough, this can then cause the pilot to swing through the airframe, potentially with enough force to hit their head on the nose of the glider, which is now on the ground. This collision can potentially cause serious injury to the pilot because the force of the impact is transmitted through their spine. It's also likely to damage the glider, and the most common thing to break is one or both of the uprights or down tubes. So if my base bar had struck the heather, this was exactly the type of collision that could have occurred. Some people put wheels or skids on their base bar just in case of such an impact, so the glider will roll or skid along the ground and avoid a more serious outcome. However, the rough terrain on this launch and all the heather would have meant that not even wheels would have just rolled along it. So now we know just how dangerous this situation is. Let's look at the factors leading up to it. Firstly, the wind coming up the slope was very light. Any aircraft, including a hang glider, needs airspeed in order to fly. That means a flow of air moving over the surface of the wing and creating upwards lift. Until there's enough airspeed, the glider will not generate enough lift for both the weight of the glider and the weight of the pilot. So if the wind is light, as in this situation, how does the glider generate enough airspeed to fly? With a hang glider, this means the pilot must generate that speed by running. The combined airspeed of the wind coming up the slope and the forward speed of their run will generate enough lift for the wing and the pilot to fly. So in this situation, where the wind was very light, it meant that I needed to do a stronger run than I would in stronger winds in order to create that lift and start flying. The second factor in this near miss was the shallow slope of the launch. When the slope is steep, the glider will be into free air and away from having anything to hit very quickly. When the slope is shallow, then the glider will be closer to the ground for much longer. This means the glider is closer to something that it can hit, and it requires the pilot having more control for much longer. It makes the airspeed of the glider even more critical, because if the glider loses the airspeed, it's easy to stall and it's easy to lose that fine control and hit the ground. Finally, the terrain that I was launching over was very rough. The first part of the takeoff run was over grass, but then it quickly turned into rough heather. This meant that my launch run could have been potentially hampered by the heather, making it harder to run fast and easy to trip and fall. Now we've looked at the potential for disaster with this kind of crash and gone through the factors affecting this launch, let's look at what I actually did. Firstly, I started the run on the grass, which gave me more runway to get up to speed. I generated enough lift to fly before I reached the path, and I was lifted into the air. However, I had generated just enough lift to fly, and there was no extra airspeed to deal with problems like a sudden drop in the wind. The wind is usually not completely laminar, and it will gust up and down in speed. I did not have the extra airspeed to deal with this. Secondly, almost immediately after becoming airborne, I transitioned from an upright position into a prone position, where I was essentially laying down with my hands on the base bar. This is the flying position for a pilot, and it's the most comfortable and streamlined. However, by doing this, I effectively removed my undercarriage. It's impossible to run in this position, and it relies totally on the glider still flying. After I went over the path and started flying over the heather, you can see that I suddenly started going down. This was likely caused by a slight drop in the wind, causing the airspeed over the wing to be less, and therefore it started to go down to pick up speed again. The problem with this is that the ground was in the way. Because I was flying so slowly, I did not have the extra speed to potentially push the bar out a little bit. Pushing the bar out would have enabled me to convert a little bit of airspeed into height and enabled me to keep clear of the ground. But at the slow speed I was flying at, if I'd pushed the bar out, then I could easily have caused the aircraft to stall and would have crashed into the ground anyway. And because I was now in the prone position, lying down, with my legs behind me, as I started to come down, I could not do just even a little bit more running to add some more speed. I'd effectively put myself in a position where I was helpless, and all I could do was hope that the base bar would not hit the ground, and that my legs, which were dragging through the heather at this point, would not slow me down so much that the glider stalled and crashed anyway. In the end, I was lucky. The base bar kept 1 or 2 inches above the ground, and my legs only slowed me a little. I was able to fly away from the hill without crashing and breathing a big sigh of relief. I can tell you this was a squeaky bum moment just for a moment or two. So what could I have done to avoid this kind of near miss and not put myself in danger? The first thing would have been to generate more airspeed. Now you might say that I went as fast as I could as the glider started flying and lifted me off my feet, which is true. However, if I'd kept the nose pointing down a bit more, for a little bit longer, I could have kept myself on the ground and given myself more time to run even a little bit faster before flying. Taking just 2 or 3 more steps would have made all the difference. Secondly, I could have stayed in the upright position, with my hands on the uprights and my legs ready to run until I was clear of the launch. This would have given me the ability to run a bit more if the glider had come down and prevented a possible crash. Now, I'm not proud of this launch. I pride myself on getting my launches right, and I've taken off at this particular site many times, so I do know how to deal with it. But I hope that from this analysis I can first of all improve my own technique, and secondly help other people avoid making the same mistakes that I did. If you enjoyed this video or you found it useful, then please click that subscribe button and join me for more videos and flights in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.